Hello, this is Brett Lonsdale from Lightning Tools, and I want to welcome everybody to this session with Laura Rogers, SharePoint MVP from new founded company actually called IW Mentor. Yeah, Laura is going to be presenting on automating your work with Microsoft Flow. So I'm really looking forward to this session. It should be fantastic. I've known Laura for quite a long time now, in fact over 10 years, and we actually met as both being authors on the SharePoint Administrator's Companion for Bill English, so a 2007 SharePoint admin book. And yeah, not long after that, Laura and I decided to do a session together, which was at a SharePoint conference, and I think that's pretty much how Laura got into speaking, right, Laura?
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. So Laura, I'm going to hand over to you, and I look forward to handling any questions that anybody might have at the end of the session. So if you do have questions, feel free to raise your hand, which you can do in the webinar software. Don't literally wave your hand because we won't see that, but if you can raise your hand in the GoToWebinar software, I'll be able to unmute you and you'll be able to ask your questions. So we'll hold off for questions until the end of the session. Also, I think Laura's going to give some contact details where you might be able to ask some questions offline as well. So Laura, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Brett. Hey, everybody. It's good to see you. Today's presentation is Automating Your Work with Microsoft Flow. I'm Laura Rogers. My own SharePoint training company is IW Mentor, like Brett said. And this presentation is interesting because Microsoft keeps changing and improving Flow just week to week. So I am constantly keeping these slides updated and enhanced with all the awesome new things that are going on. Here's a little bit about me. I, of course, work at my own company, IW Mentor. I've been a Microsoft MVP for 6 years. I am in Birmingham, Alabama, and my blog is wonderlaura.com. And as Brett mentioned, we've written SharePoint books. I've been an author on about 7 of them. And here you can follow me at WonderLaura and also my company at IW Mentor. We've got a lot to cover today, so I might be talking a little fast. There's a ton going on with Microsoft Flow to tell you about. First, we're going to do an intro, and we'll talk about different types of connections you can have in Flow and the concept of connections. And we'll talk about the Flow design interface and then managing and troubleshooting. First of all, pretty quickly, what is Microsoft Flow? Anyone can go to flow.microsoft.com and create flows, even your mom. Anyone can do it. You don't have to have an Office 365 account. You could just use your own free Windows Live ID. So there's nothing stopping you all from going out there and just trying it out right now and trying it out as I talk. It's really cool because it integrates with a lot of different systems and services, not just SharePoint, not just Office 365, but over 100 different services, and they're constantly being added to the list. It doesn't require writing code, which is huge because I am not a developer. I love no-code solutions. It can also be used, you can go to flow.microsoft.com, but you can also get the mobile app Microsoft Flow, and you can install that on your phone, and you can build apps and even run apps and troubleshoot apps all from that Flow, troubleshoot flows from the app. All right, here this is just a small sample of some of the type of connectors that you will have in Flow. You can send email, not just Office 365 email, but it has a lot of different ways you can send email, Gmail, SMTP, Outlook.com. You have a lot of different file type services, so not just SharePoint and OneDrive, but you've got Dropbox and Google Drive and other places like that that have file sharing that you can integrate. And of course there's Yammer, OneDrive, even Google Calendars, and even Excel spreadsheets. Like you could make a flow, iterate through all the items in a spreadsheet and do something with each of those rows. And of course, and you have databases too. You have you can do SQL databases, Azure, a lot of different types of databases and systems that you will be able to integrate with. CRM and Salesforce as well. Here's a good example that I like to use about, you know, kind of an example of integrating different services together that you had to get a developer involved in the past to be able to do something like this is Salesforce to SharePoint. Say, you have a lead that's been generated over in Salesforce, and all the SharePoint people don't necessarily all have logins to Salesforce, but you could have an automation that says when a certain thing happens, when a contact or lead gets to a certain point, then it creates something over in SharePoint to say, start a SharePoint project, or write a statement of work for that customer. So that way you have the systems talking to each other in a very easy no-code way without having to do anything complicated. Here's an example of this concept of connections in Flow. As you're creating a flow, when you start adding different actions in there, it will prompt you to authenticate to create connections if you haven't created them yet. So this is just a small screenshot of just some of the types of connections you can create, like MailChimp, SharePoint, Twitter. There are a lot of different, social type accounts in here that you can connect to. And then to get to the list of connections, so once you've created flows and started authenticating to these different services and creating your connections to them, it just uses your authentication, then you have the ability to go back and manage those connections later if you need to do anything or troubleshoot or clean them up. You can go to the little gear icon at the top right when you're in Flow and go to connections. So that's how you can get back there. Also, for those of you who have on-premises data and on-premises SharePoint, you have the ability to create gateways to be able to communicate across from the cloud to on-premises, vice versa. And you devs out there, you can do custom APIs. Here's an example of just some things you might want to integrate. It has a lot of templates. It uses templates for just basically to give you ideas, to give you examples, to kind of help you see maybe where you want to start when you start creating flows. So I recommend, if you've never done a flow before, at least sort of skim through and look at a lot of the example templates that they have out there, just to kind of get the wheels turning and thinking about what might be possible. So you can do simple things like notifications, not only email notifications, but you can even make it do mobile pop-up notifications as well. You can synchronize files, say I want to put files from a OneDrive over in SharePoint, or I want to take files from the Google Drive to OneDrive. You can even do cool things like take attachments out of an email and put them in a SharePoint library or in a OneDrive. So you can do a lot of things with files that you couldn't necessarily do with SharePoint Designer workflows. And you'll probably notice I'm going to be comparing these to SharePoint Designer workflows a lot, because there are a lot of kind of pros and cons to both. There's still a good bit of things you can do in SharePoint Designer that you can't do in Flow, but there are a good bit of things you can do in Flow but not SharePoint Designer. And just, as you're thinking about moving to Flow and starting to create these, it's not necessarily, I've had a lot of people ask me, well, is SharePoint Designer going away? Do I need to do all my flows in Flow now? Well, right now it's really just going to be sort of a case-by-case basis. If you have something that's fairly simple or something that's new that you want to try out in Flow, I recommend using it to kind of get started in there, but you don't necessarily need to like jump ship and try and recreate all of your SharePoint Designer workflows in Flow right now. It's just a good thing to kind of start dipping your toe in there at least and start seeing what you can do. Instead of doing it the old way, try doing it this way. The approval process in here is really slick, so I'll be demoing that for you. But another great thing about it is that you have the visual workflow creation process. So similar to some different third-party workflow applications that give you sort of diagrams on the page where you can drag shapes around to create your workflows. Well, this is a visual diagram, and even when you're looking at flows after they've run, you're looking at a visual diagram. So you'll be able to see kind of the shapes representing the actions, and be able to kind of follow them to see where your where your flow is going to take you as far as different conditions, etc. And of course, another awesome thing about these integrations, it's cross-platform, cross-service. One of the things you'll notice when you're creating workflows to just go from one SharePoint list to another SharePoint list, that every time you create a SharePoint action, it asks you for the URL to the site. So where in SharePoint Designer workflows you were always pretty much stuck within that one site, within all the lists and libraries of that site, Flow is just anything goes. You can have one web app talking to another. You can have, across different site collections. You can have your on-premises SharePoint triggering something that does something in your Office 365 SharePoint. I mean, sky's the limit when it comes to going across those different services and different SharePoint environments. All right, here's a little bit about, and I'll do some demos as well, but here's a little bit about the interface when you're looking at the list of flows you've created. You have My Flows, so as soon as you log in and go to flow.microsoft.com, you'll have My Flows as the link at the top that you can start with. And this is where you'll see the list of flows you've created. And you may notice that this team flows, this has just appeared in the last week or two. This is brand new. And this is one of the things that people have been asking for and requiring, since day one when Flow first came out sometime last year. Team flows is a huge concept because this means that now when you create flows, they're not just for you. They're not just everyone's personal flows. You can actually collaborate on them and share them with other people. Huge. So I'll go a little bit into kind of what you'll see on this interface. You can turn any flow on or off with the toggle. The information button is going to be where you'll look at the history of the runs of that flow and be able to see errors and see different ones that have run and what the outcomes were and details about them. And then this little people icon is a brand new when the team flows came out. So if for any flow that you've created in My Flows, you can click the little people icon, and that's what will let you share it with other people. And you're just going to be picking people from like a people picker to be able to share that flow with. And then once you've shared it with other people and they go to team flows, that's where they'll see other flows that have been shared with them. So that's how the flow sharing works, is by using the people icon to share them, and then everyone it's shared with goes to team flows. And then another thing, of course, you can delete flows, save as. This is huge. I wish this button had been in here like 3 or 4 months ago when I was creating some flows for a project that I was on, because I had to create a few different ones that were very similar. Save as really kind of lets you make a copy of it. So you do that, and then you're basically making a copy of the one that you're on, and then you can go to have that other one and make a few changes to it. But you don't have to start from scratch every time. All right, a little bit more about specifically designing a single flow. Like I mentioned, you can create flows from a template or start from blank, just from scratch. The first thing that you're going to do is to create a trigger, and manual is one trigger where you'd actually have to push a button. But there are a lot of other different triggers, and I actually have another slide about those. And then all of your actions, there are hundreds. So there are about 100, at least 110 different services you can connect to. Each one of those services has a handful of different actions that you can pick from. Like, for example, SharePoint has when a file is created, when an item is created, when a file is modified, when an item is modified, etc. So you get the drift. So there are going to be hundreds and hundreds of different actions that you can pick from when you're building this. So they made it easy so that each time you add an action to your workflow, you could actually just start typing if you know kind of part of the name of what you want to add, and it will quickly filter down the list for you. And there are also some, when you see in the interface when I demo it, you'll be able to see they've added some little quick filters to it for commonly connected services that we use. You can do conditions in your workflow. So you'll say, if yes, do something. If no, do something else. If this field equals, if the status equals completed, do this. If, whatever your conditions need to be. If something's approved, do this. If it's rejected, do this other thing. And then you can also have loops. Loops are actually very cool and very smart, because they will actually recognize when they need to be there. For example, I created a flow that needed to iterate through, just go to a specific spreadsheet and go iterate through all the rows in that spreadsheet, and what it was doing was for each row that it found, it was creating an item over in a SharePoint list. Well, as soon as I pointed to the action to get the spreadsheet. Then the next thing I said, create SharePoint item. And as soon as I started adding the data from the spreadsheet, it immediately knew that the spreadsheet could have more than one item and that it would need to be a loop and that it would need to go through each one. Another example is email attachments. I created a flow that when an email comes in, it looks at the attachments and takes each attachment and puts it over in a certain folder in OneDrive. Well, it automatically knew that there could be more than one attachment on your email, so it created a loop. So you can manually create loops, but they will also appear there if they think they're needed. All right, so a little bit more about triggers. This has been recently enhanced, so that's why I added a whole new slide about it. Of course, you have some common ones in there, like you've done probably in SharePoint Designer workflows, like trigger this when a new item gets created, trigger this when a new item gets, when an existing item gets modified. But you also have some brand new things that have been going on in here. Now, the manual trigger button has been in here a while, but they just made some enhancements to the manual trigger. So before, you actually had to go to the Flow app on your phone if you wanted to manually trigger something. There wasn't a way to just from the admin interface of all your flows to be able to manually trigger a flow. You actually had to use the buttons. So that was a little awkward. So they made it so that now you can still manually press the button on your phone, but you can also have inputs. So in a SharePoint Designer workflow, that would be your initiation form. So sometimes when you manually create a workflow, you can let people, they're basically, clicking a button to trigger that workflow. But sometimes you create an initiation form because when they run the workflow, you want to ask them a few questions first. So this is new. You can do inputs now attached to your button so that they can fill something out before the workflow runs, if you'd like. Also, now your flow buttons, you don't have to go into the Flow app on your phone and then go to the button screen and then click it. You can actually pin a flow button just to your phone start screen. This is huge. It makes it really fast. So you just pick up your phone, unlock it, and hit the button to run the flow. So it's a lot less clicks. It makes it a lot more simple. They just wrote a blog post about that on the Flow blog just a couple of days ago. So yes, a lot of improvements to the flow buttons. It's very exciting. All right, time for a demo. First of all, I'm going to just kind of walk you around in here fairly quickly to show you around in the interface. When I went to flow.microsoft.com and I'm logged into my little fake tenant, my demo tenant that I use, my WonderLaura tenant. And I can go to My Flows. So this shows me all the existing ones that I have. But let me show you this. So you can go to Templates here, or you can go Create from Template. And here's where you can see just a whole bunch of examples like I mentioned. So this is, again, you can browse this to kind of get ideas as to what you could do in here. So you can see each of these different services has different icons that you can pick from and be able to easily see what it's doing. And then you can narrow it down if you want to just kind of see a smaller subset and sort them. So again, and you could also just type a keyword up here and search through your templates. So I could just type SharePoint and see all the SharePoint templates. Also, from My Flows, you also have services, which is just basically a list of all the services that you can pick from, and it tells you a little bit about each one. They have a lot of learning and documentation in here. I highly recommend you go read through those. And then, so a couple of new things over here. They've kind of, over time, they've kind of rearranged how you get to some of these things. But of course, I can go to my list of flows over here from this little gear. But this is where I can get to my list of connections. This was a screenshot in one of the slides. And my gateways, custom APIs, and the admin center is also here. So there are a couple of different ways we can get to the admin center, which is where you admin and control who can create flows, which I'll talk about later on in the presentation. So when I click on connections, a couple of times I've had to do some troubleshooting, and I have a lot of different tenants that I work in. I have my work tenant and my demo tenant and different customer tenants and things like that. So my connections, I think, got confused at one point because maybe I had a few different SharePoint ones in here. So I had to go in here and basically delete and recreate the connection. So this is where you can go to do that. And it's not going to break your flows if you have to do that, because when you recreate it, your flow will just, go edit the flow, it'll just ask you to re-authenticate. So it's not that big of a deal. But this is where, these are all the connections that I've created already and that I've authenticated to. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to my flows, and I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like when you're creating one from scratch. You can give it a name up here, and the first thing that you're going to do is pick what the trigger needs to be. Now this little section right here, like I mentioned, is fairly new. It's really awesome because the first thing that I would always do here was I would just type SharePoint, but this is a quick button now that lets me just pick SharePoint and be able to see these are the SharePoint triggers. Now you look at this, I can see that there are only 4 SharePoint triggers, but there are 18 SharePoint actions. So different services might have triggers versus actions. So for example, maybe, Instagram, I'm just making up one off the top of my head. Maybe Instagram, only has actions and doesn't have triggers or something like that. So if you don't see that many things listed under triggers, that doesn't mean that that service doesn't have a lot of actions. So this is where, let's see, I'll just do a flow button, and I want to manually trigger. So this add input text is the new thing that I was telling you about, that that you could ask people a question when they start their flow. And then as you're going through your flow, just a few little things just getting around in the interface. We have an information button at the top right of each of these shapes, and that will maybe give you some information, further information about that particular action. So I'll do one here. I'll just say, I'll add an action to disappear. Okay. Oh, see, it needs to contain at least one trigger and one action. I think I took too long on the screen. Let me try that again. My flows. I wasn't really actually going to create one. I was just going to show you a few things in this first demo. So, all right, there we go. So basically, okay, that one worked. SharePoint. So I can just type SharePoint like that. And then it says, here are my different actions that I can pick from. And so what I want to show you here is just kind of some things in the interface and how this works. So you'll have an information button on some of these that'll give you more information. That one's not very helpful because it's got the exact same verbiage as the name of it. But adding a comment is going to be helpful. Now adding a comment is just for you, the flow designer, and that's for you to, if you come back a year later to this flow and you look at it and you say, what was I thinking, or what was this about? You made comments in here because you're trying to help yourself so that you'll know later what you were thinking when you created this flow. So this is really just for you, for your information. And you'll also have some of these, you can rename them. So I don't want to have a flow that's got create item, create item, create item, and it's just a bunch of generic create items. So this will let me say create project or something like that. All right, oops, you get the idea. Create project. Okay, so then if I pick a SharePoint action, it's going to ask me to, pick the URL of where my site is. So for example, I'll go to this little demo site that I have and grab the URL to the site, not to the list, but to the site. So once you put a site in here, it's actually going to resolve that site, and then from there it will show you a list of all the lists in that site. Notice that you don't see that many things listed here. Well, I chose create item as my action, so item is only going to show me list. If it was create document, it would show me libraries. And it's also only showing me custom lists right now, so that's one of the limitations currently in Flow, is that any other lists you have besides custom lists, like an out-of-the-box task list, contact list, calendar, those types of things, those are not going to show in here, so kind of keep that in mind. So then from here, once I pick a list, then it will actually render all the different fields that exist in that list. And so another important thing about this interface is once I start putting information, like putting my cursor inside of the boxes in whatever actions that I'm using, the way the interface works is that it has a lot of information. These are like variables that it's holding on to. Variables are something that just exists while the workflow's running. So for each different type of action you create, it's going to have variables. So for example, if I use the get manager action, well, the variables it's going to return to me is a bunch of information about the manager's name, email, department, things like that. So all the variables, you could have a very long list right here of information if you have kind of a long flow that's got a lot of different services involved. So you can quickly do a search through here to find what you need. So then that way I can just insert this information into the fields as I'm building my flow. So I can do a combination of fields and just text like this. All right, so that was a quick demo just showing, getting around in here. So we're not going to create this flow. We're not going to do that yet, but I just kind of wanted to show you around in the interface to get familiar with kind of the way it works and the way you can do what you need to do. I'll flip back over to my presentation. All right, I'm going to flip through a couple of examples here that I've done in screenshots. Just it's a little quicker to show you screenshots than it is to kind of like wait for each web page to load. So this new customer contact, I'll actually demo doing this whole thing in a minute. But the idea here, now the concept behind this whole presentation is basically taking the typical things that you do in a day in business and automating them and making them more efficient. So as a SharePoint consultant, one of the things that I do is I have new customers. I put them in my SharePoint list for customers, my SharePoint list for projects. I have a SharePoint list for timesheets, and then I send them statements of work. So one of the cool things about Flow, another nice thing that I love, is that you do have the ability to send an email to someone outside of your company. You cannot do that with SharePoint Designer workflows. You can actually just have a text box that has an email address in it, and Flow will send the email and an email action to that person. So that's huge for me. But in this example, I'm creating a new customer in a list, in a SharePoint list, and I'm making it, it creates a contact in my Outlook contacts list. So there are a lot of Outlook actions in here, just things that you can do to automate just your own mailbox, your contacts, tasks, events, and the email, and just thinking about automations across all those things. Of course, we have Outlook rules, which you do a lot of those things with, but Outlook rules, don't do a lot of things as well. So just within the Outlook for Office 365 actions, there are a ton of different automations you can pick from. So this one was create contact, then it sends an approval email. So it looks at, we're going to show, I'll show you one that looks at who the person's manager is that created the new contact, sends the approval email to them, and then if it's approved, then it goes and creates the customer, creates the project, copies the file, and actually sends the statement of work in an email to the customer. Huge. So if no, then you can make it send them a rejection email or anything like that. Another example is timesheet approval. When a new timesheet item is created, you want that person's manager to approve that timesheet item. So you use this get manager action. Now this is not a SharePoint action. This is not a necessarily an email action. This is an Office 365. You can see like the little Office 365 logo. So when you get the manager, this is very powerful. It gives you back all kinds of information, not just their name. It gives you a lot of information from their user profile, like their department, their picture, their email, first name, last name, all that information. You can send the approval email to the manager and then update the item with a status field of basically whether they approved or rejected it. And so you can see get manager, and you're getting the manager of who. And remember I mentioned all those variables. So since I created an item in SharePoint, when a new item's created, it gives me back a lot of variables about that item. So created by, whoever created it, that person's email is one of the variables. I even have created by picture, created by department, things like that, created date, etc. So I'm going to get the manager of the user who created the new timesheet. So that's kind of how that functions. All right, and then I added a couple more things. So for sending the approval email, I'm sending it to, see the little logo, see how it's got, they're all color coded. I'm sending it to that manager that it got. All right, and then when you're using these boxes, you can actually combine, text and fields from, from your variables that you have. And then you can give it different outcomes like approve or reject, or you can type whatever you want here. And the email that goes across is, this part is awesome because when they get the email, it has this lazy approval concept. So it has all the information they need in the email, and the approve and reject buttons are just in the email. Do you guys like that? That's something that people have been asking for years. It's just lazy approval. You just click approve in the email, and you're done. And so that makes it really easy for CEOs and managers and people. You don't want to have to click on something and go to SharePoint and go all these different places, right? So if you provide them, I put a bunch of HTML in here, but if you provide them a bunch of information about the thing they're approving just in the body of the email, then they have what they need, and you don't have to go to SharePoint and click on something. So in this example, since I did this screenshot of this example, the HTML doesn't work anymore. I did a bunch of HTML code in there. It ended up in the email before whatever change happened. The email actually rendered as HTML, but there was a change recently that was made that it made the approval email a lot prettier, but now I just need to not put all these HTML tags in here because it didn't render, it looked exactly like this. It was kind of messy. So just kind of make a note of that don't do what I did here with the HTML tags in the body for the approval email. Now that only applies to the approval email. That doesn't apply to just regular emails. Okay, so just for this specific action, you're not going to want to put HTML tags in it. So you have a lot of extra information you can put in here, like importance. You can even make this workflow action send an attachment in the email. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as a best practice for getting things approved, but because in SharePoint, you usually try to kind of keep things in one place and have like that item in SharePoint, that one document in SharePoint be the one version of the truth, and try to get people to just go to that document, right? So you technically could, though, put a file as an attachment in the email, so someone would actually open it and look at the document from there and be able to approve it. So, but then, yeah, again, if they save it to their hard drive, and then you've got different copies floating around, so it's just something to ponder. All right, this is the update item action down here, this last one. So it's going to go to my timesheet. Which item is it? It's that variable that from the very beginning when a new item was created, that's the ID from that item, and then it's just putting a status of approved. Or I could just put the variable of that approval action that comes back as the outcome from the result. All right, and here is another concept for just, again, making your day a little bit easier. And a common thing that I do when I'm working with customers is I'll have, maybe you're going back and forth with a customer and they're sending you maybe emails with documents that have requirements attached to them. They're sending you Excel spreadsheets and different things like that that are associated with a project that you're working on. Well, you could create an automation that could just take, an email that you put in a certain folder for customers or that you flag with a certain thing, and get the attachments out of the email and go and create that as a file over in a particular document library for you. So this could actually, if I trigger this, it would create a file. I just had it do the path as whatever the from email address is, which would just be my customer's email address. So because your email itself doesn't have that much metadata, right? You really just have subject, from, to, body. You don't have much to work with. So I just use the from field as that's the folder that the attachments will go in, and it's just taking the content of that attachment, it's looping through each attachment in this little loop here, and putting them each in that folder. All right. Here's another, just as kind of a little fun one, was Power Apps, which, you know, I could talk for hours separately about Power Apps. There's not really room in this presentation to do that, but Power Apps has a way that you can create a button, and the action for that button is to trigger a flow. And you can have inputs for that as well. So in this, and I could have a Power App that's got a screen where people can type some text and maybe capture an image from their phone camera, and have a button in the Power App that would say post the tweet, and then here's the tweet text, and here's the media, which would be the picture that they took. So that's just a little fun one there. When you're running a small business, a lot of these little marketing, social media things, and having them automated is really helpful. So I know that as far as workflows and SharePoint and getting work done, some of that social media stuff seems kind of frivolous, but you know, people say, well, that's not real world. Who, you know, takes something and creates it in SharePoint and puts it on Twitter? And you know, that's a little weird. Well, I've heard people say that, but again, for small businesses and for being able to market your small business and have automations, it's really saves you a lot of time. And so speaking of that, here's an Instagram one. When I upload something new in SharePoint, it's going to look at all the hashtags that I put on it for Instagram, and it's going to loop through each tag, and if the tag is SharePoint, it's going to post a tweet with that information in it, in that picture, and it's going to post it to my Facebook page for my company. So that's just a fun little quick simple thing that you can do in a flow. I wish I had time to demo every single one of these, but there just isn't enough bandwidth because I have so much to tell you. We're going to go ahead and go into, I'm going to do the next couple of slides, and then we'll spend the rest of the time demoing and actually run through one of the flows. That's the Create Customer one. There's a good bit to know about the flow diagnostics and troubleshooting. After you've run the flow, now this is not like SharePoint where when you run a SharePoint Designer workflow, you go to the item that you ran the workflow on and you can see the workflow log there, the status. This is totally different. When you run a flow, you're actually going to need to go to flow.microsoft.com, look at My Flows, and click the little information button next to the flow, or on your flow app on your phone, you can click the little activity button for that flow, and you'll be able to see what happened and when it happened and whether any errors occurred. So error notifications are going to show when you're in flow.microsoft.com, you'll actually have error notifications as like a little pop-up at the top right. And when you're looking at your log of when the flow ran, it actually is still a visual diagram with the squares down the page, just like it was when you created it, and it will have little icons for green or red saying, you know, what happened or didn't happen in the workflow, and you'll be able to visually see where the error was. All right, demo time. All right, let's go see if we can see one that's got an error first, so we can look at where that error might have happened. I want to see a failed one. Okay, so here's a failed log of a workflow. So it looks like I uploaded new media, and it shows just really a lot of details about the Instagram thing that I posted, and then it says, you know, what happened. An action failed, no dependent action succeeded. So this tells me it's got the little green checkbox next to the thing that did happen, and it's got red next to the thing that didn't happen. So I can see exactly what I need to pinpoint and say, oh, well, maybe I typed something wrong in there, or maybe it's not recognizing that account, or my connection isn't working, but I can visually see where something is going wrong. All right, and then I can also go back to my list of flows. If I have a workflow that, I'll have to create one that gets manually triggered in here. If I have one that gets manually triggered, I'll actually be able to run it directly from here, which is another new functionality that's just been added recently. Okay, so here's my flow for a new customer contact, and let's look at the information for this. This succeeded a day ago and 2 days ago. Let's see. I ran this during my user group meeting when I was doing a demo the other day, and look at that. I can see that it did everything. It sent the approval email. did all the stuff, and it actually sent the email, the statement of work in email to who it was supposed to send to. So this one's functioning. Now what I'm going to do is, this is the one that I showed you in the screenshots, the new customer contact. I'm going to log in to my tenant as a different user because it's going to look for the manager. So I'm logged in as me, as you can see up here. So I want to log in as another fake user who has me as her manager, so I'll be able to show that functioning and show you the ability to for it to capture who the manager is. So I'll go to sites, Power Apps. And then I'm going to log in as Allie B. Oh, I should have done in private browsing so it doesn't get all confused. Yay, I signed out. Okay, let's see. Got a lot of test accounts in here. Okay, Allie B. And she is going to create a customer once she gets into Flow. Well, she doesn't really need to go to Flow. She just needs to go to the SharePoint site, right? / Power Apps. Gotta love authentication. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so let's go look again at the flow. What is it going to do? So the new customer contact. It starts by a contact, it gets triggered by a contact being created in this customer contacts list. So let's go over to SharePoint and go to my customer contacts list, and Allie B is going to create a new customer, and that's going to be Brett. And I'm even going to put your email address in here, Brett. Not your phone number though. Company. All right. I just guessed, but I'm pretty sure that's your email. Brett's the CEO. I'm putting as much of information in here as I can so that you can see, when we get the results of this flow. And let's see, I think that's good enough. All right. Okay, so it created him. So here he is in this list. Now, what should it be doing next? It should be, go to my other, should be creating a contact in Outlook, and then getting his manager, and then sending an approval email. So let me close this design view of the flow, and I'm going to go into the little information screen so that I can visually see it running. Now this one's not showing yet. Sometimes it takes a few seconds for it to appear in there. But one thing I'm going to see in here is, let me go to my little fake user here, and let me go to that email box. Let's see. All right, look at that. New customer approval, Lightning Tools. Isn't that lovely? Look how pretty this is. Look how professional this email looks. Please take a look at this customer and approve for a statement of work to be sent to them. Now, all I put in here was the contact information and the company name, but in that approval email, I could have crammed a whole bunch more information in there, so they'd know what they're approving and not have to go anywhere. So I'm going to approve that. And this is really slick, or at least it was really slick last time I clicked on it. It actually keeps you in the email, and it actually shows you your result right here in the email. Now I'm going to kind of speed this up, and I'm going to click on another one and click back. Let me try again, because it will actually say right here in the email that your information was sent. So I'm not going to sit here and wait for this. I'm going to go back and look at the little log here. Okay, so let me refresh this. Okay, start time a day ago. No, it's not. That's not that one. Yeah, it's this one. It's just not showing it yet. It's actually running, but it's not showing. Oh, there we go. Succeeded 1 minute ago. All right, here we go. Look, it's done everything. So it got the manager. So I created the contact. It created a contact for me in Outlook. Let's go look at Outlook. created under my contacts. Look at that, there's Brett. So now he exists in my contacts. Well, notice someone else triggered the workflow. Allie B triggered the workflow because she's the one who created the contact, but it was my flow. So it actually created the Outlook contact in my Outlook. So that's interesting, good to know, right? And then, so it created that, and then it sent the approval email, and it's telling me all the information in the approval email, and it says that they selected approve. So let's go back to the email, and I can see that it actually finished, the little spinning wheel finished doing what it was doing, see? Your response, approve, has been successfully registered. So it doesn't even necessarily take them anywhere. It just, right there in the email, it renders like what their response was. That's magic. It's automagical. All right, and then then it sent Brett an email, and then he got an attachment. So let's go back and look at that. So it sent him an email. It copied a file, which I have like an example statement of work, like a template statement of work that I use, that I send to all my customers. So it copied it from this example file to the statement of work library with the name of the customer as the name of the file. And so it created that file, and then that is, let me scrunch this down, that is what it sent to Brett in the email. Isn't that awesome? See? lightningtools.docx. So that is the magic of a fairly complex workflow with an approval process in it. Yay, golf clap. Okay, let's go back to, we got only, what, 13 minutes left, and I still want to show you some of this management stuff real quick. All right, let's see. Okay, Flow Admin. A couple of ways you can get there. You can go to your Office 365 Admin Center and click at the bottom left where you expand out all the different admin centers, like where you see SharePoint and Exchange. Flow and Power Apps are listed there now. Flow and Power Apps admin centers, clicking either one of those takes you to the same place. We have these new concepts now in this admin center called environments and data policies. What is an environment? There are a few different reasons you might want to create different environments. This is to maintain separate databases if you're using the common data service. If you want to have different, sort of completely different databases used for different purposes. You could also create different environments for different regions that your company has, and you can create roles in that environment. So you can have admins, which those are the people that are actually in charge of the environment itself, and they can manage who the makers are, which are going to be the people who can create flows. So the admins manage the environment and can do environment settings, and the makers are people that can create flows or create Power Apps. So you can segregate it out into separate different environments. And where are you going to see that? You're going to see that when you click your name at the top right when you're in Flow or Power Apps. And this is where you can flip between different environments. So I can have a whole set of, say, I have an HR environment. I can have a whole set of HR flows and HR Power Apps in the HR environment, which I can keep separate from all the IT apps and IT flows in the IT environment. I can have a UK environment, etc. And that just gives you a little tighter control. Data policies, they can apply to all or any specific environments. This is a little weird, a little odd to explain, but what you're doing in these is you're going to create a policy that lets you pick and choose which services, like MailChimp, SharePoint, OneDrive, all the different services that exist, and you're categorizing the services into whether they're business data only or no business data allowed. So this is where you can control which services people are allowed to use in which environments. I have this comparison chart that I kind of started with, that there are a good bit of differences between SharePoint Designer and Flow. I'm going to go ahead and go do a demo and show you the management stuff first, and then we'll get back to this. This is the last slide, though. We've got Power Apps. This is the admin center, so you can just go from up here and get to the admin center from here. So I'm just jumping straight to it. All right, here are my environments. This is my default. So you all are, my tenant is just called Laura Rogers. It's my Wonder Laura, my test tenant. But this default environment is, notice that when I go to maker, everyone in the whole tenant is a maker. So that means anybody in my tenant can create Power Apps and flows. So good to know, right? That's going to be the default. And then this is where you can define your admins for that environment. So your admins for this environment don't have to be Office 365 admins. So this way, Allie right here can just go to the settings gear from Flow and go straight to that environment, to the Flow admin, and be able to get there and not have to go to the Office 365 Admin Center to be able to get here. Data policies are, I'll show you this test policy. Basically, all you're doing when you create a data policy is pick which services are business data only and which services are no business data allowed. So I could just like move them back and forth between the different little sort of groupings. So any one service is either going to be up here or down here. And then for that environment, you're going to say which of these two groups is the default. All right, and so that's all data policies consist of. All right, so that was a little fast, but that's how you can get to those, and that's how you can define who your makers are and who your admins are in each different environment, like that. All right, let me go back to the slides. I definitely have a good bit, kind of more things to be able to put in here, like one example, and every time I do this presentation I think of things like one example is the ability to send an email to somebody outside of the company. You can do that in the Flow, you can't do it in SharePoint Designer. The ability to send attachments in email, you can do that in Flow, not SharePoint Designer. So that's all we have for that, and I'm going to keep updating this and maybe I'll put it on my blog or something. But thanks for coming. I love Lightning Tools, and don't forget you can follow me, Wonder Laura, and IW Mentor. I have a free SharePoint Power Hour that I do Wednesdays at 11 Central on my YouTube channel called Wonder Laura. All right, and I guess over to you, Brett, to see if we have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Laura. That was really informative. I really appreciate that, and thank you for the love for Lightning Tools as well. That's cool. Yeah, we have a couple of raised hands already, so or quite a few actually. So we're going to start off with Alexander Weinhardt. So I'm going to unmute you, Alexander. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Alexander. Yes, we do.
Okay, great. I do actually have a couple of questions because I'm coming from a SharePoint Designer environment. And probably the biggest problem that we currently have is we have problems with SharePoint Designer calculating dates or texts, very simple things that you think, but a big problem with SharePoint Designer. Now, what's the capabilities of Flow in these disciplines?
Flow can do simple text variables right now. It does not have any kind of calculations that like SharePoint Designer has. It doesn't have number variables or date variables to be able to do some of those advanced things. Does that answer your question?
And yep. And probably a second question, just real quick. Is there a limitation in Flow concerning complexity or the length of a flow like it is in SharePoint Designer?
I haven't ever hit any kind of limit like that in SharePoint Designer, but in Flow, what happened to me once was that the page timed out. It was like the browser page just timed out because I had so many actions. It just couldn't render them all, and the browser would just shut down. So I'm not sure if that's something that they're working on. That happened to me about a month or two ago, though.
Okay, thank you.
All right, perfect. Okay. Thank you, Alexander. Okay, let's see. We've got David Schrag. I think I'm saying that right. So, David, I'm going to unmute you now. Hi, David.
Hi. I've found Power Apps very difficult in terms of creating a simple form. And I was wondering, other than just entering one line of text as you showed in a manual flow, can you create a form, a data entry form, simply within Flow that then sends that data off and does the rest?
Right now you can just create text inputs. Just I don't know, you can't do anything complex because they're all just text, but I agree what you're saying. Well, what you're saying about Power Apps, though, excuse me, just keep in mind that they keep improving it, and so they know that it's not very user friendly, then that just keep looking forward to it, changes in the future and updates and it getting better and better. But yeah, right now the inputs for the manual trigger are just text, but you can add multiple
You can
ones.
have multiple text inputs there. Good, thanks.
All right, thank you, David. And yeah, Laura, grab that great big cup. There we go. I saw that earlier on. So we should have another question somewhere from Ben. Yeah, Ben Rickles. So, so Ben, I'm going to unmute you now. Oh, I'm not sure Ben's got his audio set up. So yeah, I just got a rejection on that one. So let's just try somebody else. Sorry about that. Okay, John Davis. Hi, John, do you hear us?
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering how you add the HTML formatting to an approval email now. You say that we do not put it in at all?
Though that was my solution, is that I think that ever since, how the approval email had that pretty little box that the approval text was in, I think ever since they added that made it so that you can't do HTML. So that's as far as I know right now. And in regular emails, you actually have an is HTML drop-down box for yes or no that you can when you're sending just the send email action. But the approval ones, I'm not sure if that's coming or not. Sorry.
So if we're adding all the information in there so that they don't have to click into it, it makes it a little more difficult to format now, right? Okay.
Yeah, I might mention that to them, but I think that there's a user voice for that type of thing, that feedback. SharePoint.uservoice.com, I believe.
Yep, I think that's right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we have Ed Bagsick, I think it is. Ed? Hi, Ed, do you hear us? No, maybe not. Let's just try one more. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. We have, I think it's Noah Mejio.
Hello, hi.
Hello. How is my pronunciation?
Yes, it's fine. No. My question is, currently we have our libraries that are the current experience, not the modern experience. Can we initiate flow from a current library, from a library's current experience?
Yes. Right now, though, the only way you can manually trigger one is from a flow button or from that list of all your flows. But you can have any flow point to any list or library and have it run on create or on modify. It doesn't matter what the end user experience looks like.
Okay, but the user who's accessing the library will not be able to manually initiate a flow from the library itself.
Right.
They need
they might be adding that. I saw there was an article about libraries and flows, but I haven't seen anything that's on the item at least yet.
Okay. And my next question is, we are under the governance cloud. So I was wondering, do you know when is the timeline to have flow in the governance cloud?
You do have it. I have a government customer that I work with every day, and I've created flows for them. Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be a matter of somebody turning it on in the Office 365 Admin Center.
Okay, I see. Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more. So if you didn't get to ask your question, I think we should use your Twitter account, Laura. Is that right?
Sure, yeah.
And we can post some questions there. So let's just go for one more question, because there's quite a few people with hands raised here. So we have Simon Hudson. Simon, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hey there, Brett.
Hey.
Hey, Laura. How are you doing?
Hey.
So we've got a bunch of needs around document control and triggering actions based on changes in metadata in documents. Is that supportable using Flow yet? It's particularly around dates, but any kind of status change on a metadata item.
Well, even in SharePoint Designer workflows, there isn't really logic that says only do something if a specific field just changes. So there isn't any logic like that in Flow either that just would point to one particular field. Like usually when something's running, when something's modified, it's just something got modified, not a particular column.
Yeah, that sucks a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. The only way that I've been able to get around that in the past is to have like a copy of that column that's like a hidden column that then you create workflow logic that says to see if the main column exists is equal to the copy of, and if it doesn't, then you do a certain thing. But I think that logic you could do in either type of workflow.
Okay.
There are third-party products that have that capability.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
Thanks, Laura.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, well, I just want to thank everybody for attending. I'm sorry if we couldn't get to everybody to ask their questions, but if you'd like to tweet Laura, I'm sure she'll be happy to answer any questions there. Yeah, thank you very much, Laura. I really appreciate your time and for doing this for us. Very much appreciated. I hope everybody enjoyed it. The webinar was recorded and will be available tomorrow, so you'll be able to see that on the lightningtools.com website. Under community, there's a webcasts page, and the recording will be available there. So thank you very much, everybody. Take care.
All right. Bye. Thanks.